might see, done on the 26th, April 26th. And just to point this out, you guys will already realize this, but I've got that American style date thing going here, right? If you're wondering, what is the 26th month? Okay, well, here's an old standby that shouldn't be an old standby, but it happens a lot more often than it should, which is the arbitrary reduction in the test execution period. This saying, we're going to cut the test execution period in half. Instead of it being 6 weeks, we're going to plan on 3 weeks. Why? Because we want it done by March 26th. So, this looks like it's going to work. Draw the Gantt chart and make it look like it worked, but are you actually going to be done testing at that point? Probably not, right? And then you've actually taken on, you've maximized the amount of risk that you can take on in this way, because what's likely to happen is as you get towards the March 26th date, test execution period, you will find the system is not in any sense good enough to ship. So we've got a lot of bugs showing up. You're squeezed, so you're making a lot of very aggressive bug triage decisions, right? You're choosing to defer a lot of bugs that you would otherwise fix, and so the quality is going down. You're going to have a schedule slip anyway, probably, because as I said, the system's not going to be good enough to ship by the end. And usually, a schedule slip during the system test period is about the most expensive kind of schedule slip you can get, because generally the burn rate on the project, the rate at which you're going through money, is maximum and during the system test period. So it's the exact wrong time to have a schedule slip. And ultimately, there's often an attempt to throw buggy features overboard as you get closer and closer to the end date and realize you're not going to make it. Now, the problem is that can have unintended side effects on other parts of the system. So as you start taking stuff out, you realize, whoops, that feature over there actually depended on this feature being in there, and that can lead to the sort of cascading effect of consequences that were unforeseen, some of which are detected in testing and further slips occur. And so you might end up actually, through this approach, having an end date that's much later than the originally planned end date, and with worse outcomes in terms of both schedule, not just schedule, but also quality, budget, and features. So not only do we miss the original planned date, the April 30th date, but we actually end up shipping something that's worse than we otherwise would have shipped, costing more, having fewer features. So really, it's a very good idea to avoid this. So it does happen. This is how the Gantt chart would look on the assumption that magic is going to happen. Okay, so as an alternative to that, how about looking at risk and saying, let's reduce the scope of the testing based on risk. So what we can do is look at low-risk areas, and we can say, you know what, we're just going to not test that at all, or we're going to say, you know what, we're going to say, look, if we have an opportunity to test in this area, we will. Or maybe we'll do some exploratory testing here, kind of wander around, and if we see bugs, we'll report them, but that's it. Okay? We could reduce the depth of testing in the highest risk areas as well as a way to try to free up some resources. So the stuff that we were going to test really, really extensively, maybe we say, no, we'll test this, we'll do a broad test of it, but we're not going to go deep. Other things that you can do, look at things like automation pilots and test tool development. But no, we're not going to do that, or we can outsource some of your testing. Now, the important thing here when you're going through this, because if you're doing risk-based testing, the risks were identified by other stakeholders on the project. You need to make sure that those other stakeholders are aware of the reduction in scope that you're imposing. Otherwise, they might not be happy with that. Okay, so They're always pulling the schedule in based on scope triage. Another thing that you can do is during the planning process, drop functionality, right? So maybe there's certain functionality that's determined to be sort of second-tier functionality that can be dropped or postponed to a subsequent release. And that could also reduce the test effort and potentially pull the end date into the desired date, let's say it's March 26th. Now, obviously, we can't do this unilaterally in testing, but it has to involve the entire project team agreeing, yep, we're trying too much, too little time, we need to shrink the scope of this project. But you also have to keep in mind that this is not without cost either, because of course the features are not being done, and there are people who want those features. And then if those features are hastily assembled immediately after the major release and then thrown out as some sort of poorly tested patch, now you've got a whole lot of regression risk that comes with that, right? So really you want to think about, okay, what we're going to do is those features are going to come out in a regularly scheduled release later, ideally, rather than being shot out as one-off patches. Okay, so there's the schedule assumption that we can reduce scope, again, hitting the 26th. All right, so the idea here is that we're going to try to get realistic, actionable schedules and result of this, using best practices in project estimation and management, basically the same techniques that would be used to estimate a bridge or an airplane or building a house, anything. Those are known project management best practices and can be applied to testing as well as anything else. We do that, we should have a work breakdown structure that's complete, accurate, identified the risks, we balanced the different risks. We have commitment of the team, we've got individuals who said, yep, this is how long it's going to take, I'm going to do it, committed to that. And we've got the dependencies and the critical path clearly identified, and we're on top of the implications of that. And in the negotiation process, we've allowed executive management to balance the various competing risks. So we've gone back, presented them with options, they've come back to us, said, okay, do this, do that, try to pursue options that make sense, like reducing system scope and reducing test scope rather than things that don't make sense, like throwing a lot of people at it, or just cutting it off and saying, well, we'll be done on this date. That doesn't make a lot of sense either. And then once we have this schedule in place, we can use this as a way of guiding the project to success by weekly or twice a week or perhaps even every day going through the Gantt chart and looking at where do we stand. All right, so that's the presentation. At this point, we will do the Q&A. For those of you who are not in the live audience, submit questions that you have through the webinar Q&A feature. Before we start the questions, I just want to mention once again, for those who missed the introduction, the January webinars have been rescheduled. That happened a few weeks ago. So if you signed up in the last few weeks, and you're fine. If you had signed up a while ago, then you should have gotten an email updating the schedule. If you didn't see that, just go out to the RBCS website, rbcs-us.com, and check the schedule there and make sure that you've got it right. If you sign up now, you'll see the right date. So we'll let the Pronto folks here kick it off. Kick off the questioning.
I've got one.
Great.
We were talking about the need to deliver something, so they delivered the estimate and they said no, we need to do it by such and such a time.
Yep.
And we were talking about overlap of phases or reduction of the test execution period or looking at risks and things like that.
Yep.
Any of those worked really well? Is there any of those